Let's introduce the panelists for this session. First, we have Bryan Liles. He's a fixture in the cloud native ecosystem. Bryan is a principal engineer at VMware, where he writes code, he pushes folks to be a better version of themselves, and he does talks like this. So he's always got really great things to say. Next, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Nicole Forsgren. She is the VP of Research and Strategy at GitHub. Previously, she was the lead author and investigator for the DORA State of DevOps reports. I've been lucky enough to work with her in the past, and a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is based on her research. And then lastly, rounding out this all-star panel is James Governor, analyst and co-founder of RedMonk. So James is all about focusing on the developer experience. He's always outspoken, he's got sharp insights, and so I have no idea how I'm going to keep up with this panel. But let's welcome everybody to the stage. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm excited to get started. We have a lot to talk about today, so let's do this. I'll start here. So coming out of the Honeycomb keynote with Charity and Nora, Charity mentioned the DORA metrics more than a few times and the value of shipping features fast. So I want to start there, right? Specifically with the DORA metrics. And here's what I want to ask. I want to go around and get an idea from the panel. What impacts have you personally seen those DORA metrics and that way of looking at our practices? What impact have you seen those have on organizations that you've worked with? I'm going to pick on Nicole last for obvious reasons. So maybe Bryan, let's start with you. How have the DORA metrics impacted orgs that you've worked with?
Wow, so this is a really interesting question at this time in my life where I've moved. Just to frame whatever I'm getting ready to say, I work in telco now. So people are thinking of data centers and lots of hosts. I think in terms of telephone poles. And in regions, there can be tens of thousands of telephone poles. So think of huge distributed data centers with software that right now, let's say we upgrade it every 2 years. So when I think about DORA, and actually I took a note because I wanted to say this correctly, is like with DORA, I think with the DORA and the DevOps, we always think about these services that are always up, can be upgraded whenever they need to be. So we think about, what is it? Deployment frequency, I'm thinking of one. Mm-hmm. Mean time to recovery, change failure rate, and mean lead time for changes. I think that these are great metrics for really anywhere, but I think the application of these metrics, especially in my domain, is a little bit different than than the advice that I'm hearing right now from the status quo. So I will say this, the DORA metrics are actually a great base to start from, but we also need to, with any advice, we need to take into account to where we want to end up and who our customers are. And we want to apply that advice to there. And in a lot of cases, even with some of the great things that Charity Majors says, we can't apply those things directly just because there's some real physics that are stopping us. So that's just my idea there.
That's a really interesting lens. I love that. It's like the practices might be sort of aligned correctly, but the measures might, like the specific measures might need to change depending on application or industry. I don't know, James, what's your take on that? You see a lot of different companies in different settings.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and I agree a lot with Bryan that, you know, there are, I mean, in a way, it's either an icebreaker or it's a please read the book. So, you know, like with, you know, I speak to a ton of different people from different industries, and I'm going out there and like, what are the proxies for where they are on their journey? And, you know, if you're in a group where everyone is like, I know about the DORA metrics and I've read Accelerate, which everybody must read, then, you know, you've got a sense for where they are on the journey, what they're trying to kind of achieve. Are they ready for this change? You know, sometimes you talk to an organization and you're in a perspective where, you know, they're like, you know, to Bryan's point, maybe they're like, well, we want to change things maybe twice a year. And you're kind of like, okay, you know, maybe baby steps are required. But what I've seen is that organizations that are thinking about the work that frankly Nicole has done, that are thinking about what it means to deploy more frequently, what it means to improve your mean time to recovery, what it means to do these things, that they're on the journey. So it's to my mind, it's a bit like, here is let's have this conversation. That is a great idea. And they may or may not, for me, it's are they on a journey or not? So that's kind of what it means. Are they moving forwards to more effective software delivery, or are they, maybe not so comfortable with that?
Nicole, I'm dying to hear your take. What do you make of that?
I love this whole conversation, and like this really is the right approach to take, right? Because I've worked with and chatted with so many teams, and by teams I mean developers and SREs and sysadmins. I've worked with leadership teams, and I've worked with teams across a gamut of industries. So I have worked with internet companies, I've worked with telecom, I've worked with so many folks. And I think, I love James's point that it's about the journey, it's about improving. And I really, really love what Bryan said, right? It's about taking the measure and applying it to your context and sitting there. I think I get a little, I'm getting old. I'm getting old and twitchy. I'm getting very get off my lawn, because when people like call me and they'll be like, you need to do a new SODR, right? Like you need to do state of DevOps report, but do it for industry X because you did it wrong and I'm not in your chart. And I'm like, you're just a low performer and it's fine. And all that means is either we need to improve, or it means we need to think about how we can apply it, because this has been done in printed media. This has been done in silicon chips. This has been done in things. And what it might mean is we need to think about how we can apply it contextually and smartly within our context. I mean, I've actually had an orthopedic surgeon call me and say that he read the book, and he was like, some of this does not make any sense. But there were large portions of the book that really made me rethink what this meant within the hospital and what this meant within my operating room. And I hadn't thought about it this way. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? But what it does is it makes us rethink about the opportunity and the possibility to apply some of these concepts within our domain. And within that, I really, really loved, Bryan, thank you, what you said about like, what does this mean within some things, it's just physics, like it's not gonna be real. But if you read this and your reflex is, no, this isn't for me, and you toss it, maybe not, right? Maybe what this means is I need to look for an opportunity to look for ways to improve. What does this mean within my context? What does this mean for a continuous improvement journey? Because really the goal is improving outcomes for our customers and outcomes for our developers and our development teams to have better ways of working.
I love that view of looking at everything in context. And one of the things that I love about the research that you've done, Nicole, is that year over year, right, there are additional practices that are identified, like, how we improve is that continuous journey, right? And it is all about finding the right context for the folks that, are replying, are participating, are letting us know, what practices look like in their organization. And so to that end, I want to switch the focus a little bit over to observability, and where does that fit into what folks are doing? So where does observability fit with either high performing teams or in the telco industry, right, or across the industry? Like, where does that fit in the spectrum of practices?
I'm going to jump in because, yesterday we had a great example, Fastly fell over, a huge amount of sites, then fell over. There was a bunch of content that we couldn't see, but that team got together and was able to get things up and running again in under an hour. And it was extremely impressive. And pretty clearly, they as an operations team, as an engineering team, have a great set of practices, have a great set of people, a great set of processes and tools where they are able to identify problems that are causing problems for their customers and deal with them. And I think that for me, I mean, there are a few routes in that you can take. I mean, some people are purely thinking about velocity. And, they might be it might be for them where are we on the CI/CD journey? We're doing testing. How comfortable are we, with automating those deployments? It might be another lens around, just frankly, developer velocity. And, that's their calling. How do we do that? They might be coming in from a perspective of, oh, we want to be able to decouple deployment from a release and think about progressive delivery. We want to be able to deploy to different cohorts. There are lots of different routes in, but for me, observability is going to be key to, really succeeding in any of those dimensions. Good instrumentation, understanding the system. And so, yeah, observability, I like to talk about, are you comfortable to ship code on a Friday, right? And on a Friday afternoon. And a lot of organizations, they hear that and like, whoa, no, there's no way I want to deploy my new digital service on a Friday afternoon. If it goes wrong, the rest of the weekend, everything is going to be terrible. You ask Charity Majors, and she's going to say, look, not deploying on a Friday afternoon that's like a bad smell. That's like, you need to do a bunch of things to be confident that you could ship at any time. And so for me, I think observability is one of the conversations you have. It's one of the underpinnings for production excellence, which really touches a number of different dimensions. So yeah, I mean, I think there are different ways you can look at the journey. So if we think about, you all are now like doing the observability maturity model, thinking about that. And to my mind, that builds on the work of folks like Nicole, that builds on the fact there are lots of routes in to improving how we build and deploy software. But yeah, good troubleshooting tools are not optional.
So I got a comment. Years back, we talked about monitoring. Shout out to people who know about what NetSync is. Not even going to go with the Nagios, however you pronounce it. But then, shout out to Charity again for helping popularize this whole idea around observability. Lots of people are talking about it, but over watching what Charity's been doing over the last few years, that's a lot of the thoughts are around that. But I actually saying, you know what, all this is garbage. We all have something to sell. And generally what we're trying to sell is what we lead with. Nicole's out here, she's selling books. She did a good job. Her book is on my shelf right behind me right this second. But you know what? I'm actually trying to break this down even further. Observability, what is that? Well, we want to be able to have a system that is observable so we can take action or make changes on it. And at the business level, maybe we think about SLAs and we think about SLOs and SLIs. When we should think only in that realm. When we think about, we too quickly hop to metrics, tracing, and logs. And I'm like, you know what? That's just how the systems are. That's just the limitation of our thinking. And that's why I'm still pushing people up to SLAs. I have an agreement with somebody else that I'm going to deliver something. And then I use my objectives to make sure that I can determine, and then those indicators below that to make sure that tactically I'm doing the right thing. Guess what you can do? You can take from business metrics at the executive level down to like the directors, down to the engineers or people writing code, and then down to your operations people or your SRE teams. It all translates different and it's all different code. But at the end of the day, it's SLA, SLO, and SLI. And I think the reason I like to think that way is because it allows us to drive forward without getting lost in the mess of when you have Honeycomb and then you have whatever other product that you want to do. Or I'm just going to use open telemetry. Or no, you know what? I work at VMware, so I'm going to push on my vRealize suite. I'm like, well, no. What we're really trying to do is agreements, objectives, and indicators, and everything else is noise, necessary noise. But let's focus on what's important.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, right? It is about I guess those indicators that show that you are delivering a better experience, right? And to your point, it's not about data types. It is, what are those capabilities that are unlocked, right? What are those capabilities that help me understand those systems so I can deliver those better outcomes? And so on that note, Nicole, observability, where does it fit, like in the DORA metrics and the approach?
I really, really love Bryan's point there. Kind of, it depends on how you define it, right? So when we ended up investigating this, I want to say it was 2018, in order to try to kind of study something or like figure out if it makes a difference, at least in a bunch of the DORA work or anytime I kind of study things, I steer clear of any kind of tool. And what we do is we focus on the capabilities that it ends up delivering. So when we ended up studying this, we found that monitoring and observability loaded together. So which means that like people kind of conceptualize them similarly, but it's probably because they do similar functions, but they were both predictive of this high performance concept or software development delivery performance, our ability to ship software with both speed and stability. But how we ended up defining these, and by the way, we talk about it in the report. We think that if we focused on folks who specialize in this, it would probably tease apart into separate things. The way we defined them was that monitoring is probably a set, or not probably, we define monitoring as a set of predefined metrics. So things like logs, things that we, at least like back in my day, things that we're used to having set up already, right? Logs, metrics, things that are already coming in, things are setting up in a database. And then observability as a way to, it's a set of unknown unknowns. The data that you don't already have, when I need to, it's almost like the sysadmin version of debugging. If it's not already there, but I know there's a problem. So based on my definition, or a definition of a handful of people in the observability space, I think that is something that is unique and important and interesting in our ability to Bryan's point, deliver those SLAs and then meet those SLOs and then think about at least a couple of those SLIs maybe, or if we're not quite meeting those SLIs, how do I think about focusing on our users? And I peeked in the chat. I will answer that better, but how do I think about teasing apart severity for our users? How do I pay attention to the right MTTRs, right? Because if something has gone down, there's one thing versus like it's gone down, but it's not affecting users. Okay, but if it's gone down, but my logs can't answer it yet, right? That's monitoring. My monitoring can't tell me what's wrong. I think this is the really unique, interesting case where observability steps in. And it gives me the superpower to kind of link through and debug and explore and dig through my systems in ways that I might not have pre-built into systems because either it's intensive, it's expensive, or it just didn't even occur to me before because I haven't had that failure before. Yeah. It really wasn't there. And I think this is kind of that combination where we want to have both monitoring and observability and how that kind of helps us contribute to serving our users, serving our team, serving our customers.
Yeah, I just want to jump in a bit and agree with Bryan a whole lot more because, I think that sometimes we get confused about agreements, objectives, and indicators. I think a great example, my business partner, Stephen, he used to work as an SI and he goes into one of his clients and they're like, we're going to do, we need to work out how much it's going to cost us to do 24/7, 365 support. And, we think that's a good goal. We're going to do that as a business. And he was like, okay, let's talk about that. And they're like, yeah, no, it's really important. We need to do this. And he was like, well, so who's using the system? And he said, oh, that's our customer service operatives. He's like, oh, so, and what are their working hours? And they're like, well, they work from 9 till 6. And he was like, yeah, okay, so you're talking about a system to support 24-hour operations, and yet you only actually need to be working for like 8 hours a day. And I guess in terms of US time zones, maybe a little bit longer than that, but really thinking about the business needs to think about what's the agreement, and then that's what you optimize for. So I think that's one of the things, it's easy to get confused about, like, because the thing is, if you are optimizing for 24/7, 365, 5 nines, that costs a lot, and you have to understand why you're investing in that. So I think the agreement objective indicator point that Bryan makes is absolutely right. And sometimes the business doesn't understand it. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do here is have a better conversation between the technology, the people running that technology, building the applications, and then the business.
And I think we also need to be having better conversations with the business people and the technology costs, because sometimes they'll just walk in and they'll say, oh, I need 5 nines. And I'm like, but do you? And do you understand the cost implications of 5 nines versus 4 nines, or 4 nines versus 3 nines? Because there's a big delta there. Do you really need this? And do you understand?
Let's talk about that. Do you really need this, right? I want to ask a more brass tacks level question, which is, we've talked a lot about sort of the right indicators and the outcomes that we're going for, but I want to zoom back a little bit and think about our audience a bit, right? If I am an engineer that owns my code in production, how do I pitch some of these things to business stakeholders that might be demanding those, like, I want those 5 nines.
Turn it into money.
In a startup, right? Maybe that exec is like 3 or 4 levels away from me. In an enterprise, maybe 7 or 8 levels or more. Like, as an engineer working on a team, what can I do to help align that vision for what we can actually deliver and what my stakeholders expect?
Well, I turn everything into money and risk.
Yeah, money and risk. Well, really, this is a life lesson. Learn how to convert everything you're doing into business value. You know what? I don't care what language you use. I have 300 or so odd engineers in my purview, my immediate purview, and access to 1,000 more. I don't care what language you use. I write Go and Java and TypeScript, but I don't talk about those. I talk about the integration between systems. I talk about the outcomes of systems. I talk about business impact. And you know what? If you want to convince people who have purse strings, don't just talk about you will make more money if you do this. No, say, I've reviewed all the scenarios, and if we do this over this one, this will allow our customers to have this much more success over time, and not just for the next quarter, but over the next few years. That's what people want to hear. That's what MBA types want to hear. That's what people who actually have money want to hear. But we don't want to, us as tech people, we don't think that. We think, I'm smart, I'm going to use a whole bunch of quarter words, and people are going to be awed. I'm surprised they're not.
The quarter word for real. Clear, concise, easy language is much better. And if you can tie it back to a recent event, that's helpful too. Like if you just had an outage, this will avoid something like that.
Yeah,
or
lots
this will
of
help us leverage
again.
something good like this.
After that, like I say, we had that outage yesterday, had that conversation. I think Spotify does this really well because everything in engineering is from the perspective of FTEs. So how many full-time employees and engineers are required? So like if you're going to invest in technology, like how many people are you saving? Like if you're going to invest, there has to be a reason for doing that. And the reason for doing that is you can have more people working on new problems. And so like everything for them, and this is true of the engineers, they're driving like cost management of their cloud spend into the engineers thinking about this. The engineer sees this. It's like, how many engineers can we gain the business if we make this change? And I think that's again, that's like, people are money. Like in technology today, I think everyone understands the talent. Well, no, not everyone understands it. Everyone should understand the talent is the most important thing. And so your ability to hire is super important. If you could say, hey, we're going to save, 5 people over the course of X amount of time so that we can invest in them as a business, that's a great metric. I think it's really smart.
Well, I love it. With that, Bryan, Nicole, James, I want to thank you for participating today. We're almost up on time, so thank you. And I want to remind our audience that you still have time to squeeze in a few last questions. So if you have more questions, go to the hnycon panel track Slack channel. We're going to drop into that channel for some additional Q&A, and we'll see you there.
Thank you.